He looked just like the actor. Same jawline, same voice, same charm. But when the bank vault came up $2.3 million short, and the surveillance footage showed a Hollywood smile, the town realized they weren't watching a movie. They were living one. When he stepped off the train wearing dark sunglasses, a leather jacket, and that unmistakable half-smirk, the town of Oak Ridge buzzed like a hornet's nest. People didn't believe it at first, not until a teenager got the courage to ask, "Are you?" And he responded with a wink and a low-pitched shoo. Just laying low. That was all it took. The rumor spread like gasoline on fire. Dax Carver, America's biggest action star, was in Oak Ridge. He signed autographs on napkins. He posed for selfies outside the diner. He complimented the mayor's tie at a local fundraiser. His charm was surgical, precise, and strangely intimate. People said he seemed more grounded than they expected. Humble. The type to look you in the eye when he shook your hand. Nobody questioned how Hollywood's top-grossing actor wound up in their sleepy California town with just a duffel bag and a cryptic story about location scouting. The truth was, Oak Ridge wanted to believe. A week before his arrival, a well-edited press kit had been sent anonymously to the town's Chamber of Commerce. It described a discreet documentary project that would highlight the beauty of small-town America. The name Dax Carver was dropped sparingly, just enough to intrigue without promising. A few calls to LA were made, but in the smokescreen of non-disclosure agreements and studio silence, nothing was confirmed or denied. When Dax showed up in the flesh, everyone simply connected the dots. Who would impersonate someone that famous, that boldly? Kyle Mercer knew this psychology well. He'd studied it for years. He spent 6 months perfecting the voice, the gait, even the posture. He watched interviews on repeat until he could mimic Dax's eyebrow raise to the millimeter. But it wasn't just the look. It was the attitude, the careful balance of humility and untouchable aura. He learned the small anecdotes Dax used in interviews and reused them in casual conversations, down to the phrasing. Most chillingly, he rehearsed it all in front of a mirror with a stopwatch. Even his natural pauses were timed. Within days, he was the town's golden guest. The mayor gave him a key to the city during a faux ceremony on the courthouse steps. The town newspaper ran a full spread on Dax's commitment to quietly giving back. He even attended a local fundraiser where he donated $20,000 in crisp $100 bills to a local children's hospital campaign. It was all part of the script. The money? Nobody knew where it came from. No one thought to ask. The bank, eager to impress such a high-profile visitor, offered Mr. Carver a private look at their historic vault for a possible documentary segment. It was a tradition, after all. One they'd done for visiting historians and local dignitaries before. He accepted, naturally, with practiced modesty and a signature Dax chuckle. "I'm just a guy with a camera and a story," he said. They gave him the full tour. The head of security even showed off their latest biometric upgrades, proud of the tech the bank had recently installed. There was no need for force or threats. No break-in. Just access granted willingly. After all, celebrities aren't criminals. Celebrities are symbols of trust, of fantasy, of power wrapped in charm. To solidify his performance, Mercer made sure to be visible. He ran a tab at the diner. He was spotted jogging at 6 a.m., greeting locals with a nod. He joked with the sheriff about doing ride-alongs for research. He flirted tastefully with the librarian and asked the hardware store owner where to buy real boots. He left a digital footprint just enough to be noticed, but not tracked. Every move calculated to reinforce his lie. What made it so dangerous was how real it all felt. The children of Oak Ridge were told they could dream big because Dax Carver came from a town just like ours. Teachers used his visit to spark essays on ambition. A local bakery even created a Dax Delight cookie. It was more than admiration. It was communal pride. In one short week, Mercer wasn't just impersonating a man. He had become a myth. Behind closed doors, though, things were different. A camera hidden in his motel room clock revealed Mercer practicing lines, alone, night after night, pacing in his socks, adjusting his tone, critiquing his movements in whispers. "You're not Dax until they feel you're Dax," he'd mumble. The footage would later become crucial evidence, showing not only deception but premeditation. He wasn't delusional. He was deliberate. The illusion held perfectly, until the day the money vanished. The town woke up to headlines of betrayal. And just like that, the admiration curdled into disbelief. Those who had smiled at him now combed through their memories, questioning every handshake, every word. But the deeper horror was not in being lied to. It was in how easy it had been, how completely they had suspended disbelief simply because someone looked like a star. The courtroom, weeks later, would struggle to separate truth from performance. But the illusion had already done its damage. The morning the money vanished, everything in Oak Ridge looked normal. Sunlight over the hills, birds over Main Street, and the familiar chime of the bank's glass doors opening at 9 a.m. But inside the bank, normal gave way to confusion and then to chaos. It began with the vault. A routine audit conducted by Assistant Manager Clara Dorsey revealed something off. At first, it was just a number that didn't match. Then, she noticed the sealed packets were out of order. Moments later, her hand trembled as she counted the bills for the third time. $2.3 million was missing. No sign of forced entry. No triggered alarms. No broken locks. By noon, the bank was in lockdown, the FBI notified, and Clara was in an office sobbing through her retelling. She had personally given Mr. Carver a private after-hours tour of the vault 2 nights earlier. It had seemed harmless, routine, a celebrity getting an inside look for a project everyone believed was real. She remembered how he laughed when she showed him the old safe model from the 1930s. How he asked questions, technical ones, about the modern security upgrades. How his eyes lingered just a little too long on the access panel. Clara's hands were clean. She had nothing to hide. But her guilt would weigh heavier than steel. Surveillance footage was the next puzzle, and the first red flag. The system had auto-deleted portions of the vault's hallway footage between 7:18 and 7:26 p.m. on the night of the tour. The official explanation? A scheduled update. But the IT team later confirmed that someone had tampered with the system remotely, just enough to corrupt the exact time window during which Mercer, posing as Dax Carver, was in the vault. What remained was the audio, and it was unsettling. The audio file, played during court proceedings, echoed with calm, mundane conversation. "Wow, this place is really something. We keep most of the cash in Level B. What you're seeing here is only a fraction. Must be bulletproof, huh? Thick as concrete. And biometric locks, very hard to replicate." Laughter. You'd be surprised what people can replicate these days. Then, beeps, 4 short ones, followed by the quiet hiss of an opened vault door. Then silence. It was the last known moment Mercer was near the vault. The next day he vanished. And so did the money. Investigators tried tracing his steps, but it was like chasing a ghost. Mercer had checked into the motel under the name Daniel Weston, a fictional character Dax Carver once portrayed in a spy thriller. The ID looked legitimate. He paid in cash. He left no fingerprints, no digital trail. The receptionist said he was polite, even reserved, and tipped generously. When asked later if she had suspected anything strange, she shook her head. He seemed safe, familiar. The credit card used for the car rental? Stolen. The car itself? Found 3 states away, abandoned behind a truck stop with its plates swapped. Inside was a script titled The Small Town Heist, a character study. Prosecutors would later use it to argue premeditation. calling it a script-turned-strategy. The timeline, pieced together through witness accounts, was murky. 7 p.m., 2 days before the audit. Mercer enters the bank with Clara. 7:26 p.m. Audio cuts off. 7:40 p.m. He's seen by a local couple outside the diner. 8:30 p.m. He returns to his motel room. The next morning, he's gone. The working theory was bold, almost theatrical. Mercer accessed the biometric panel using a prosthetic fingerprint mold, a method confirmed as possible by a forensic expert during trial. With the vault open and Clara distracted, he used a concealed duffel to extract shrink-wrapped stacks of cash, previously moved to an audit pile during the tour. There were no red flags. He'd planned it that way. Authorities were initially skeptical. How could someone pull off a heist like this with no team, no weapons, no backup? But Mercer had proven one devastating truth. You don't need violence when you have trust. In the courtroom, the lead investigator testified that Mercer's manipulation of perception was as effective as any gun. Another twist, security footage from a local gas station showed Mercer, still dressed in his Dax Carver persona, handing a child a $100 bill for being brave. The jury was shown this clip, his Hollywood smile, his playful wink, the same face that had walked into a bank and walked out a millionaire. What puzzled everyone most was what Mercer didn't take. Jewelry? Left behind. Account info? Untouched. Only cold, traceable cash. Marked for internal distribution and hard to move in large amounts. It was risky, loud, and brazen, almost as if he wanted them to chase him. The defense tried to poke holes. Could they prove it was Mercer on the footage? Could they confirm the man on camera wasn't the real Dax Carver in disguise, playing some bizarre PR stunt? But that line of argument started to unravel the moment Dax himself entered the courtroom. What lingered in the air was one question. Why Oak Ridge? Why a sleepy, trusting town where everyone knew each other's names? The answer, whispered in closing arguments, was chilling. He chose Oak Ridge because it was the kind of place that didn't lock its doors. Not just the homes, but the hearts. The vault didn't just hold money. It held the illusion of safety. And one man with a mask of fame had walked straight through it. The moment he walked through the courtroom doors, a gasp rippled across the gallery. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but even without them, the tension was electric. He wore a charcoal gray suit, sunglasses, and the unmistakable aura of someone who had lived his entire adult life in front of a lens. But today, Dax Carver wasn't here to perform. He was here to confirm whether the man on trial, smiling, composed, and bearing his exact likeness, was in fact not him. The courtroom had never felt smaller. Kyle Mercer didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his seat or break eye contact as Dax approached the witness stand. If anything, he seemed to be watching a scene he had already rehearsed. Calculated, almost proud. The prosecution called their star witness with measured gravity. Mr. Carver, please state your full name for the record. Dax Elliot Carver, the actor responded, his voice lower and more tired than the one fans were used to hearing. He removed his sunglasses slowly and scanned the courtroom before his eyes locked onto Mercer. It was like looking into a mirror, and yet the reflection was tainted. I've never met that man before this trial, Dax said firmly, pointing toward the defendant. But I've watched hours of footage. I've read the statements. I've seen the surveillance. That's not me. The jury leaned forward. Everyone in the room did. The defense objected, attempting to cast doubt. With respect, Mr. Carver, could it be possible that your memory of acquaintances from early in life is imprecise? Maybe he's a cousin, a half-brother, a family secret? Dax gave a wry smile. I've been in the spotlight since I was 20. If I had a twin half-brother, or even a second cousin that looked this much like me, trust me, TMZ would have found him before the FBI did. There was some laughter from the gallery. quickly silenced by the gavel. But the point had landed. The real turning moment came when the prosecution revealed a stunning piece of evidence. A series of emails sent to Dax's private account, an address not listed in any public database. They were cryptic, unsigned except for a pseudonym. Your shadow. The emails read like riddles. They love you because you're untouchable. They'll love me because I'm reachable. What if someone lived your life better than you? Say nothing. I'll make us both unforgettable. You'll get your cut. Just let the legend multiply. Dax confirmed he received them over a span of 4 months. At first, I thought it was a delusional fan. Then I thought maybe it was some weird viral marketing stunt from a PR agency. But when I saw the Oak Ridge headlines, I realized this wasn't a prank. The prosecution asked if he had responded. Dax shook his head. I didn't reply. I deleted them, ignored them. I was overseas filming in Prague when it all happened. I had alibis, hundreds of witnesses. I never set foot in Oak Ridge. The defense tried again to raise doubts. Mr. Carver, your film schedule is demanding. Is there a chance you forgot about a brief visit? Dax leaned forward. I make $20 million a film. I don't sneak into small towns to rob banks for pocket change. The gallery erupted again, and the judge called for order. Then came the most surreal moment of the trial. The prosecution asked Dax to read a prepared script, a series of phrases Mercer had been heard saying while impersonating him. The court wanted to compare cadence, tone, body language. Dax obliged. He read the lines flatly. Small towns are the heart of America. This vault is like something out of my last movie. Keep dreaming big, kid. Even Hollywood had to start somewhere. The court fell silent. Then Mercer stood and, without being asked, repeated the exact same lines. Down to the pauses, the half-smile, the subtle dip in pitch. For a moment, even the judge looked unsettled. They sounded identical. But the prosecution was ready. They brought in a forensic voice analyst who had run vocal spectrum comparisons. Despite the eerily close mimicry, the results showed subtle variances in frequency patterns and breathing that made it clear. Mercer was imitating. Brilliantly, yes, but not authentically. What shook the courtroom most wasn't the science. It was the intent. Mercer hadn't just studied Dax. He had inhabited him, memorized the patterns, learned the psychology, and tried to become not just the man, but the legend. Dax's testimony ended with a final, chilling statement. I've played spies, assassins, even a man with amnesia. But I've never felt more unnerved than when I saw someone walking around with my face, pretending to care about people who thought he was me. That's not just theft. That's identity homicide. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Dax left the stand. Mercer? He just smiled. To him, it had all gone according to script. The courtroom was still reeling from Dax Carver's testimony when the prosecution dropped the next bombshell. This wasn't just a case of impersonation. It was a life rebuilt from the ground up, forged in mirrors, deception, and a cold, ruthless understanding of human psychology. And as the evidence poured in, it became horrifyingly clear. Kyle Mercer had been planning this for years. A forensic digital analyst took the stand, detailing how Mercer had created dozens of online profiles tied to aliases, some matching characters Dax Carver had portrayed, others mimicking fan club administrators or studio insiders. The accounts dated back nearly 7 years, with Mercer slowly infiltrating online spaces dedicated to the actor. He wasn't stalking Dax. He was studying him, learning not just how he walked or talked, but how he thought. Mercer had joined fitness programs Carver was known to follow, ate at restaurants the actor frequented, downloaded exclusive behind-the-scenes interviews not aired on public platforms. But it didn't stop there. Prosecutors unveiled something that left the courtroom in stunned silence. A wall-sized digital file, Nicknamed the Blueprint, it contained voice breakdowns, mannerism charts, costume archives, accent training logs, and even notes on how Carver handled interviews under pressure. There were even journal entries written in the first-person voice of Dax Carver, as if Mercer had mentally taken on the role for real. They look at me and see a star, but stars don't blink. I blink. I bleed. I get to be him and still be invisible. That line echoed in the courtroom like a ghost. A psychologist for the prosecution later testified that this wasn't mere obsession. This was clinical identity transference with pathological intent. The complete abandonment of oneself to fully inhabit another, all for calculated gain. Kyle Mercer didn't want to be famous, she explained. He wanted to control how fame made people behave around him. The unraveling of Mercer's double life became even more disturbing when investigators began tracking his movements in the months leading up to the Oak Ridge heist. He had visited 6 towns across 3 states, each with a similar setup. Checked into a modest hotel using a variation of a Dax Carver film alias. Posed as a low-profile producer scouting locations. Attended local fundraisers, schools, and businesses. Built trust. In all 6 towns, he left without committing a crime. Trial runs, the prosecution said. He was refining the illusion, perfecting the balance between charm and invisibility. Oak Ridge had been his stage, but the plan was much larger. And then came the final nail. A woman named Lena Hartman took the stand. She had met Mercer, using yet another alias, at a film festival in Austin, Texas, over a year earlier. He'd claimed to be Dax's cousin, working in stunt coordination. Over the course of 5 months, they had a long-distance relationship via encrypted messaging apps. She admitted, with visible embarrassment, that he'd convinced her to send him $35,000 to invest in a side project. She'd never heard from him again. "Every time I look at the real Dax Carver now, I feel sick," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't even watch movies anymore." But Lena wasn't the only one. A retired theater teacher in Oregon, a struggling videographer in Utah, a social worker in Idaho. Each of them duped by variations of Mercer's persona. Each of them told a similar story. He made them feel special, chosen, as if they were part of something bigger than themselves. As their testimonies stacked up, one thing became brutally clear. This was not a con artist stealing money. This was a man stealing identity, affection, trust, and dignity, and doing it with surgical precision. The defense tried to spin the narrative. Yes, he impersonated Dax Carver, the attorney admitted during a tense cross-examination. But no one was physically harmed. There were no weapons.
No threats.
Only the suspension of disbelief. But the prosecution wasn't having it. This wasn't a suspension of disbelief, they thundered. This was a forced hypnosis, psychological manipulation of an entire community. A weaponized charisma used to rob not just banks, but souls. The courtroom gallery, once filled with murmurs of curiosity, was now silent. People stared at Mercer like he was a puzzle they had once admired and now feared. Some, like Clara Dorsey, openly wept. Others simply looked away. Mercer, for his part, never showed emotion. Not when confronted with emails. Not when exposed for the psychological trail of destruction. Not even when Lena sobbed 3 feet from him. He sat as he had since day one, still, polite, and entirely unreadable. The only time his face changed? When the prosecution showed a side-by-side comparison of him and the real Dax Carver. One on the screen, one in the chair. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Mercer smiled. Not a grin. Not a twitch. Just a trace of satisfaction. Like an actor watching his final scene unfold to perfection. The jury saw it, and they would not forget it. By the time the trial entered its 4th week, the jury had already seen more than they'd expected. A celebrity impersonation so perfect it bordered on eerie. a bank heist without a single gun, and a man whose mind worked more like a director's than a criminal's. But no one was prepared for the twist that shattered everything they thought they knew about Kyle Mercer. It started quietly. The prosecution introduced a new witness, one they had kept off the record until now, under sealed confidentiality orders. When the courtroom doors opened and the woman stepped through, Mercer finally lost his composure. For the first time, he blinked, and then he looked away. Her name was Madeline Grant, a former theater coach from a community college in Oregon. 10 years ago, she had taught Mercer in a class called Performing the Mask, Identity and Illusion. He was 20 at the time, unremarkable, withdrawn, always sitting in the last row. But she remembered one thing clearly. He didn't act like he wanted to be someone else, she testified. He acted like he already was. Madeline brought with her a worn notebook, one Mercer had left behind in her class after he dropped out. She'd held onto it for years, unsure why. It was filled with character sketches, copied monologues, and disturbing entries written in the third person. Kyle Mercer is a blank page. He becomes who is needed. He wears people like costumes. To lie well, you must believe it more than the truth. If the audience believes you, the world will follow. The prosecution didn't stop there. A financial investigator followed, revealing that Mercer had once worked a freelance tech job under a fake identity. At Viridian Systems, the company contracted to upgrade Oak Ridge Bank's vault security protocols. He hadn't just learned the layout from the tour. He'd had partial access to the back-end system 6 months prior, under the name Greg Waters, a contractor who left before the work was completed. It wasn't just charm or confidence that pulled off the heist. It was engineering, foresight, and deception at a corporate level. He had inserted a security override that allowed one-time access to the biometric system, one he triggered during the tour with Clara. The bank's own records confirmed it. The override code had been activated once, exactly at 7:25 p.m. on the night of the missing footage. The defense crumbled. Their argument, that this was merely a case of mistaken identity and circumstantial evidence, was now ash in their mouths. They couldn't deny the growing mountain of proof, nor explain away the quiet intensity with which Mercer had orchestrated it all. But just when it seemed over, Mercer, stoic, silent for weeks, asked to testify. Gas. A ripple of confusion. The judge allowed it. He took the stand, looked directly at the jury, and for the first time spoke. "You all think I stole something," he began, his voice calm. "But I didn't steal money or fame. I stole permission. Permission to be seen, to be someone. I took a face people loved and made it real." He smiled, almost serenely. "I walked into that town, and people gave me their trust. Not because I forced it, but because they wanted it. That's the game, isn't it? We all pretend to be who we're not. I was just better at it." The prosecution stared at him in disbelief. "You planned this," the DA said sharply. "You call that pretending?" Mercer leaned forward. "No, I call it performance. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't denial. It was pride. The kind of pride that made the jury shift in their seats and the audience feel cold despite the packed courtroom. The final blow came in the form of a single photo. A selfie, taken in Oak Ridge, sent from Mercer's hidden backup phone, recovered weeks earlier from a locker in a Greyhound station. The image showed him standing in front of the bank vault, alone, after hours in the shadows, with Dax Carver's smirk painted across his face. The caption below read, "End scene." The courtroom fell silent. No one needed further convincing. Mercer, still seated on the witness stand, gave the jury a mock bow. It was the last time he would ever perform. The judge's verdict, justice unmasked. When Judge Evelyn Hartley returned to the courtroom for sentencing, she brought not just a gavel, but a firestorm of emotion. She stared directly at Mercer before she spoke, her voice razor-sharp and resolute. "Mr. Mercer, you didn't just impersonate a man. You manipulated a community, violated trust, exploited human kindness, and walked through the soul of a town wearing someone else's skin." Her tone rose. This was not a harmless deception. This was a surgical theft of identity, freedom, and dignity. Your brilliance was real. Your execution flawless. But your intent, cold, narcissistic, and cruel. She paused, then added with fire in her eyes. You treated people like props and trust like currency. But the law is not your stage. This courtroom is not your film set. And your victims are not your audience. Then she delivered the sentence. For charges including grand larceny, identity fraud, conspiracy, and emotional damages against 11 identified victims, I hereby sentence you to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 20. Gasps filled the room. The bailiff moved to restrain Mercer, but he raised his hands, calm and slow, like the curtain had finally closed. As he was led away, he turned once more to the gallery and smiled. It wasn't triumph. It was the same smile a performer gives after the final act. When the role is done, and all that's left is silence,